Hi. Hello, this is how are you? This is Shippy the Explorer. How are you doing? You caught me today in my one of my areas that I work and as another aspect of my life, and this just wondering, doing some work on the family genealogy tree that started from 1972 until now, and just want to say hello. Um, you know the Giscom pen. Um, here we go. The Giscom pen Shippy the Explorer website. It's Giscom pen www.giscompen.com has it's a website that I've put together over the years after I've researched for 1972 until now of the family genealogy and just a tree, just to get the information of all the names of possible names under the Giscom, this Giscom family heritage, and so I've been doing this from 1972, and it's such an interesting thing. Even today, I'm working on it, and so this is another aspect of who I am. I get the sun out my face, and well, I think I need the light. Anyway, so the Shippy the Explorer website, or the vlogging station, which is on YouTube, is really a combination of travel vlogs and experiences of all over the world, and also it's also meant to ever so often I get into an area where, like in Jamaica or Australia or England and so forth, and I interact with the family as I discover them, and and then I broadcast that. So I've been doing this from 1972, and have tons of material, tons and tons of material, literally folders and folders of material for the Giscom, Giscombe, and also the Fosters, and also for the McClares and the Makulskis, and so I have some of those, and for the Gordons and so forth. But as a writer also, I've put out a number of books. This is the Prism. This is basically the family book of tells you of hundreds of data, thousands of data, birth, death, marriages, wills, and so forth. And then I've gone to Three Fathers, which is a memoir, Three Fathers in the Life of a Child. And then recently, a couple of years ago, I went into Australia and met the other branch of the family and reconnect with them. And so the Shippy the Explorer is really also a genealogy information station, and so you'll see that pop up once in a while. So how do you get to that stage? You know, how did I get to that stage as Shippy the Explorer and Laurel G. Morrison as a writer? And how did I gather all this information, you know, immigration material, travel, um, wills, um, photos, birth, death, and all that. And let me go back. What led me to this is that you might be at that stage also where you are feeling that you haven't gotten to know who you are as a member of the family, whether Jones or Mesta or so forth, and or Enriquez and so forth. You want to know where did that name come from? Is it a European? Is it an Afrocentric name? Is it an American, North and South America's name, in Taíno, from the Taíno region? Or what is it? And you might be interested to know, might be interested to want to find out who you are connected to. And so that's the stage where I was over 50 years ago, 1972. And I don't even have to add it up. 1972 to now, it must be over 50 years. But it has been a very interesting journey for me. And so this is how I began. And so if you want to begin tracing your family and get into the various areas of where you are, where your bloodline came from, Europe or Africa, this is how you start. Now, I started 50 years ago when the computers didn't exist. Ancestry.com, AfricanAncestry.com, migration, DNA, and so forth. All of those didn't exist. I even started out before Dr. Gates with Who Do You Think You Are, in that great series. And so my book was written from way back then. And but this is how you start. If you want to know who you are connected to, this is how you start. Basically, I'm gonna bring my information or the lesson mainly around the British colonies. If you're from any of the British colonies, former British colonies, then you are in luck. Because what I've noticed over the years in the archives, Great Britain was meticulous in documenting everything they did in terms of slavery and migration and land development and land grants and all that, birth and death and wills. They were meticulous. They even went down into having the various categories of people. If you intermarry, then they have names for those, and they document them, and they record those things in some huge books. I can tell you, huge books. And those books, copies of most of those books, if they weren't destroyed, are in the libraries of the various countries or in the archives, the national libraries, and so forth. And so you're in a luck, especially if you are from Jamaica or from Barbados. And because in Barbados you can go to Cayville, and that's their archives is up there. And if you're in Jamaica, you can go to Spanish Town and so forth. And if you're basically residing in England and you want some information, you can go also to Kew Gardens or the Library of London, and you can research. For the Spanish countries, I would suspect that you go to the archives of those appropriate countries. Well, if you are from Africa, then that's where it gets a little bit cloudy, because the African records weren't recorded. There was some recording that took place at the port of departure, and just basically they said how many slaves or so many, how many female or so forth, and sometimes they put the tribes, and you may be able to get information there. But let's tell you how to start as how I started. Now, the best thing to start with your genealogy search, and don't think you are late, or don't worry about it. Take your time and document as you go. So the first thing you do is start out with a griot, G-R-I-O-T. And griot is a storyteller, particularly in West Africa. It's called that. They are traditional oral historians, musicians, and storytellers who preserve the past down their people's history, legends, and traditions through performance, often with musical accompaniment. In some regions, they are also known as jelly, jali, or gwewel, depending on the language. So that's where we start. But in Jamaica, I started with my girl. And that was an old lady in the village, in the district, who knew everything about the family. And so what you're doing is you start out with that person who's always telling you, oh, I know your father is such and such, your grandfather is such and such, and start out with that person. Carry your pamphlet or paper, and you jot down everything that you that you get from that person. Question them. Ask them how long they knew the person, who they are, what connection they have to the family, and sorry, jot down those things. And Shippy the Explorer, or Laurel G. Morrison, I came up with this knife format. If you see, it's the format that I have. Let me see what I have here. I have the name, the birth, professional or trade, second spouse or family member, and then the children, and the birth and death, and address, and so forth. And then up at the top, I have the family, which family I'm dealing with, and also which the primary area. So I've created that form, and you can use something similar to that. But talk to your guru, Griot, G-R-I-O-T, and get all the information that you can get from he or she. And sometimes the other members and another old person, they'll jump in and they'll start to tell you all of that too. And sometimes your griot is not necessarily a family member, but a prominent prominent person in the community, whether a teacher or old farmer, minister, that type of thing. Now after you jot down all of that, then you can go to your parents if they're alive, or if not. But that's in the case it's easy for you. You go to your mother and your father, and you express what you want to do, and you start to jot down your immediate parents, and then you jot down your siblings, and then you start to ask your parents who were their parents and who were their grandparents, and so forth. You move down the line. So what I've done is, normally I put a little number up here, and I go down the alphabet and I put A, B, C, D, E, F, G, E, and F. I skip out those and I probably start at F, because I found out over the years that I'm going to find out older information, 4 or 5 generations away. So you probably can say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. You can even start at H, and your generation is H, and you put the H on the document, and that's your mother and your father and yourself and your siblings on that first page. And then if your parents know their parents, then you can go to back, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, F. You can go to from H, you go back to G, and then you can go back until you reach A, because you want to give yourself maybe, as you say, 5 or 6 generations before you, because you will find older information, or the names of older generations as you research. So you jot down your mother and father's name, your siblings, and so forth, and that's where you start. Then you go to your father's and your mother's people, and you jot down those uncles and aunts and cousins, and you're putting down, remember, you're putting down who their parents are, birth and death for the parents, and then you're going to the kids. The children, 1, 2, 3. And then I'm putting the first child is, say, Jane. I put number 1, and then I skip the space if possible, and this page will become generation, say, H or G. Then you progress like that, and you move to other family members and friends, and then you also go to teachers and you ask them information. School records, a lot of times in the colonial era, you have school records, and also you can go to the churches. The churches would keep records of marriages and birth and baptism and all that. Now, over the years, what I noticed is that some of those records from the church and the schools were turned over to the National Archives. I found some of those, especially in the case of Jamaica, and so, but a lot of times you would still find some school records in the school office, and in the church's office. Now, I remind you that you jot down all of that, and on your documentation, you're taking notes. Then you move, if there are pictures being exposed to you, I would encourage you to get a digital camera where you can take pictures of the family pictures, uncles, grandfathers, great-grandfathers, and so forth, and siblings, and have those and in your digital camera, because later on you would need those. Now, that's how I started, And then here we are now. I realize, as I said before, that Britain did not joke or fool around when they were colonizing various parts of the world. You know, there's a saying that the British Empire never sets, the sun never sets on the British Empire, because every hour of the day as the earth spins, there's another country that's under the British crown. And until in the 60s, they start to give those up. And some of those are still attached to the British crown. You think that in a case like even Jamaica, we are independent, but if you have to appeal to the Supreme Court, you better go back to England, you know. So, this is where, from Dodd Family Records, you move, you move into the archives. And in the archives, the crown, the British government had requested, I think it was officially in 1880 something, that the churches had to start documenting birth, death, marriages especially, in the church records, and also baptism. Because before slavery was abolished, we had the whole idea was to baptize the slaves especially, and then bring them into the fold of the Christian faith. And so if they were baptized, they were more of a human being, and they saving their souls. So those things were documented in those big books. So each plantation owner or overseer, he would have a big book. He had his big book, and every time he had a birth in the month, he says Jane had a baby boy, such and such, and they would name it. And those books, the birth, then if that year they lost babies on the plantation, then it was documented in the book. And how many produce they made from the plantation, how many coffee or cocoa and so forth, or sugar cane, those things were documented into the book. Now those records, what was happening is that the crown required that the plantation owners or overseers made these records and then turned those records over to the governor, so that the appropriate taxation would be attached to the plantation. And if you produce a certain amount, then you are required to pay a certain amount of tax. And then that same information, believe it or not, was sent to the colonial office in London. And I'm telling you, copies of the records in the colonies are in the colonies, and copies are also in the colonial office. And don't make the colonial office in Kew Gardens fool you. When you go, the records are there. Maybe if you have time, you insist that you see them. But the easiest place is to go into the archives of the appropriate country from where your family have been spending the last 200 or 300 years and so forth. Yeah. So in the case of Jamaica, you go to the National Library, the Institute of Jamaica, and the big bulk of it is in Spanish Town, not Twickenham Park, but out in the Spanish Town archives. Hundreds of books are there. You have books of baptism of slaves. You have church records. You have plantation um, reports. You have um, um, well, there you have some transfer of land and all that, and land grants, and in those records. But the wills are at the Twickenham Park office. It's down the street. Twickenham Park. That's the where they have the official birth, the office of registrar for birth and death and stuff and wills. So that's where you go into the archives, and in the archives you also have some political information, political government information. So if you want to go from just a few lines of jotting down to where I'm at, in 50 years, I'm here, I'm back to, man, I can't, I'm not even showing off, but I'm telling you, going back to 1630 something, in the case of the Giscombe family, then you're in for a treat. And if you want to go further and make a book like what I've made, in a series of books, then that's also possible. Now, as if you finally get your family tree started and you have explore or the libraries and things, say for instance in Jamaica, then you can go into to the colonial office in London. As I said, it's in Kew Gardens, and you can research that. If you find that your family migrated from another colonial country, say for instance, in my case, they came from Barbados in 1770 and into Jamaica. Then if you go into Barbados, then the records are there in Blackrock, the area, near the University of the West Indies. The archives is up in that area. Now the archives, what I've noticed over the years, in 40 years ago you could go in and look at the books. They may give you gloves and all that, and you take your time and diligently jot down all the names pertaining to your family and all the records, make notes. I noticed that we had access to the books back then. But since, I would say, safely think for the last 10 or 15 years or so, the governments have realized that they can make a few dollars if they do the research for you. So if you go, in the case of Jamaica, go to Twickenham Park and want to get your birth certificate, a copy of it, you can go into the office and pay the fee and request that they research based on the information you give them. They can research and find the birth certificate of whoever you want to look for, yourself or your family, or and then they would make copies for you, and the fee goes towards paying for the process. And then also wills. If you want to see a particular will, you can ask them to research a certain name, and the wills, a lot of times a will will pop up. And what a will does in the old days, I'm telling you, a will in the old days, that has helped me to put the family tree together, and wills, they would say, a lot of times they would say where they are, who they are, which country they migrate from. And they would say who is the wife and who are the kids, and how many land, how many acreage of land they have. In the will, they would also, especially after they died, the probation of the will, um, they would say how many slaves were there in the plantation, how many horses, how many cows, and who got and what were the household items, rings and beds and different furniture, who got the horse and buggy and all sorts of things, and who the slaves were supposed to be turned over to, who inherited the slaves. Can you imagine? These people were very audacious. I guess it was a way of life, but some of it is hard. When you see that they're passing a slave named Jane or some from one generation to the next, it's like Jane is not gonna die too. And the offspring, but they're smart enough because they put the offspring of Jane in there. They say the offsprings of Jane for him ever since, from this point henceforth, will go to John or to Mary or something like that. And I've seen one will where one of my great aunts, she knew she was dying and she wrote her will, and she actually is like instruction told in the will that on the time of her death, her kids, the kids were supposed to go back to her mother, and then they would raise the kids and so forth. So some of it is hard. In the wills, you will also find a lot of financial information, how many cash money they have, and what's the value of the estate. You know, at the executors were required to do that. And these are official documentation because they have to carry it a lot of times when they make the report, carry it to the appropriate, I think it was to the governor's office, and then they had to sign. So don't feel like you're lost in terms of not finding information, because as I said, if you're British affiliated, you're affiliated to the British Empire, 9 out of 10 times you have access to tons of information and so forth. If you are at a standstill, then what you do is then you can get into the modern thing of running your DNA, Ancestry.com, and to see and put that out, to see your DNA, if it's tied to who it's tied to. And a lot of times you'll find that people will call you and say, okay, who are you? And then when you realize you're putting back the family together in that effort. Also, the DNA will give you, the aspect of it will break down your DNA and kind of spell out which nationality or tribe your maybe say, let's not say states of nationality, which you're more ethnically 10% European or 50% Yoruba, or or 10% in Asian and so forth. It breaks it down like that. So that's a good thing to do. So, well, we started out, I've enjoy this as Shippy the Explorer or Laurel G. Morris as a writer, and I really enjoyed this. I remember writing, especially going into Australia. I knew that there were some Europeans who came to Jamaica from Scotland and intermarried into the family. And on my big family tree, they were their names only for a time until I put this book out, and suddenly my name was in Australia, and somebody found me in the internet, and they made a connection back to me and said who I am, and said, oh, I'm such and such a person who wrote that book. And they said, oh, can we get a copy of it? And from getting that copy of that book to Australia, over the last 2 years, I made a concerted effort to go down and meet the family. Believe it or not, they left the island in 1840s and went back to Scotland, and then they split down into Australia, and some of them went to Winnipeg, Canada. And so I've been connecting the family for the last 50 years, over 50 years, and I'm really enjoying it. So that's the basic way to start. For me, I'm giving you how I did it, how I started my genealogical research, and that's how I did it. And if you want to start, you can contact me at www.giscompen.com. And or 304-704-3629. And I'll be glad to talk to you about how you get started, and certainly tell you how you can get around some of this information. The one thing I've discovered though over the years is that you get stuck into a rut for a little while, maybe a year or so. You can't find any information on the family. You can't go forward, you can't go backward. Well, maybe backwards, because you want to go back into history too. But don't worry about it. There is always a break. And when you find that information, you explode into another 4 or 5 years backwards into more history. I give you a story. I went into Europe, it was in London, it was up into Kent, and we stumbled on a set of files that were a state court case that the kids were suing their stepmom or mom for land that their grandfather gave them. And because the document was partially written in Latin, I sat on it and I asked around. Nobody knew how to read Latin anymore, and had it for years. And until I finally we went into Kent, into the archives there, and we found the actual court cases, the deposition, if that's the right word, and we started looking at them and realize that they were really family related matters. And you know, those cases took me back to right back to 16 to the mid 17th century, 1636 on this document, because the kids had sued the mother for the portion of the estate that the grandfather had given them, and she did not do it. So the suit was filed into the appropriate courts, and so the documentation was there for us to find in this time of our lives. So don't be despaired, and sometimes you just stumble on things, and you'll find that it helps you. I use this opportunity to travel and explore the world, and a lot of times I bring you that tape. You go back into the Shippity Explorer, you see me going through London and going up into Sheffield and meeting some old persons up there, and you saw me going into Australia also, and talking and milling around with the cousins, and it's very interesting. So you know, if you have the resources, that's also good, because it's a love of this job. It's not a money-making thing. You just want to feel connected, reconnected to your ancestors, to discover who you are, who you really are. So I implore you, if this information is good, you can share this this information to other people, whoever you know that want to do this type of work, to really get into the knowledge of finding out who your bloodline, who are your bloodlines, or what are your bloodlines, whether Africa, Asia, or European. Well, that's it for now. This is Shippy the Explorer. I would say, as I said, if you like this type of thing and think it's really valuable, then do share this tape with other people. And if you can contact me, 304-704-3629, or go into www.giscompen.com and explore that website. I think it's being worked on, but there's some other information there. You can also enjoy pictures and documents and audios. They are there for you. The tree is not up again. For the ones who are Giscoms and Fosters and so forth, and Maxwells and so forth, the tree is giving us a little trouble. Anyway, like, share, and I encourage you to subscribe to Shippy the Explorer, because think it worth it. That if I release any of these, more of these tapes, then you are the first to know and see. You make your choice, and if you see the video that you're liking and you're loving it, you watch it through and share it. So I'll always say, as Shippy the Explorer, one final thing. These two books are on Amazon, Three Fathers and the Life of a Child. If you want to give a Christmas gift, especially this one, and it's an adult book. It's not for kids. it's you want to give a book, go to Amazon and buy these two books, Going Down Under. But Three Fathers is a family book, a memoir. If you read it, it's a roller coaster of excitement and information, because it tells of the difficulties of kids that are unaccepted. Parents are not living up to their responsibility, and how the kid survived that. Anyway, that's it for now. I'll see you on another video as Shippy the Explorer, and as the writer Laurel G. Morrison. I'll see if I can explore another time where I can depart some information about genealogy, information, a genealogy search. Oh, there's one thing I want to tell you. For the Jamaican records and some of the other colonial office, you go to the Moment Center site. It's familysearch.com or familysearch.net, and they establish an account, and a lot of times I use that instead of ancestry.com, but you can use ancestry.com too. But familysearch.org is a very good site, especially for Jamaica, that you can get information. Bye for now. Take care. Like, share, and subscribe. This is Shippy the Explorer. I'm out.